So, I am Trip Gardner, and thank you. Check's in the mail. And I'm a psychiatrist, and I have the pleasure of working at the Summer Street Community Clinic, where we provide health care for the homeless and the what we call peri-homeless, either side. And we do a plan where it's an integrated health care plan. We include primary care first, substance abuse, psychiatry, counseling, mostly counseling, because that's mostly the need. And we'll talk about that a little later on. The way I like to start is with the poem here. So I think someone in the back was alluding to getting personal, getting to the feeling here. And I do think that's an important part of how we get homes for people, which is really the only thing we need to be talking about, I think, first, getting homes for people. So a home is not just a roof, not just a house. So when you lose your roof, you don't just lose a roof. You lose your security. You lose the place where you can always feel okay. So it's a pretty big loss, much bigger than a roof. And when we think about helping people with housing, we've got to think about providing homes, which is a little different than providing a roof. We'll talk about that as we go through. But I was in Salt Lake, and I was an intern in psychiatry, which means you work inside the hospital doing internal medicine and neurology and pediatrics and a little bit of psychiatry. So on the side, I worked at the homeless clinic there and did psychiatry and met a fellow named Joe. And they had this great big project where they were building houses for everybody. And they built these really awesome duplexes outside of town. And it had cable, and it had cooking stuff, refrigerator, couch, bed. Boy, it seemed great. It seemed just perfect. And Joe was one of the seemingly lucky people to get a house. And Joe moved in, and it's about a month, and I went back and saw Joe again, and Joe was back living on his block. In Salt Lake City, anybody been to Salt Lake City? It's kind of a neat place the way they have it laid out. They have this block system, and it's perfectly organized, and you're like 1,500 west, 200 north, and that's your block. So he had his block, and he didn't like living outside the city. Wasn't what he considered home. So we really have to understand as much as we can about the people who are homeless, the story, the faces, and involve them in finding a home to make it last, I think. So that's why this slide is here. I start out with a lot of stats, and partly because I give this talk in other venues to people who really kind of, I think, kind of turn off to the faces and the stories. So I like to go with the stats a lot. So I'm going to go through them quickly here because I know you guys know all this stuff. But I think it's really important because they stimulate thoughts. And then thoughts stimulate emotions. And emotions lead to behaviors. It's the way the brain works. So if we don't see the stimuli, then we're not going to behave in a way that's going to help people get homes. Which, again, is the number one thing we need to do, right? So we'll talk about facts, faces, stories on homelessness. I'll try to get through that quickly because I know you guys know more about that than I do. And then we'll go into more about what we do at the Summer Street Clinic and our method. And maybe it'll be helpful and maybe not. I hope it is. But we'll talk about that next. So before I get started, how many people work in homeless shelters here? How many people work in case management where you go out and meet the people? Wow. Well, everybody, come on. Let's give them a hand. It's much harder work than what I do. That's where the rubber meets the road. So I am very appreciative of you. I feel lucky to be here talking to you. I could probably be a whole lot better conference if I listened to you. But we'll do it this way. I also want to thank Dr. Luchetti for her wonderful work. Great. I learned a lot. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And Nancy Fritz for all she's done to pull together the lots of pieces we have in Maine. We have lots of good pieces in Maine. The puzzle coming together is a difficult thing, and Nancy's done a lot of work there, and the data she shared is much better than my data, so I'm going to get her data and put it in this. So very thankful for her work she's done, and Cindy's work too. So thank you guys very much. All right, moving on. So these aren't pictures of my patients because I didn't feel good about that, but my patients look like this. This is not unusual to see in Bangor, Maine. Some numbers. 3.5 million is on the high end of the estimate, but I think the estimate probably needs to be on the high end. So 3.5 million and increasing. And I'll tell you a little story. My son's got to do a speech for 7th grade, and he knew I was doing this stuff, and he saw the slide, and he kept saying, "That's a shame. That's a shame." And now his speech is called "It's a Shame," and he goes through this, and he says, "It's a shame 39% of people who are homeless are children." And that seems high in Maine. It's a nationwide number. And that is a shame, isn't it? It's a shame that 23% of people who are homeless are chronically homeless, which is more than 1 year. And I think the official definition is 4 times in 3 years. Is that right? I don't really pay much attention to that. You just know it when you see it. Long time. Long time. 59% single adults, 1/3 are female, and then 41% families. Seems a little high for Maine. These are national statistics, but that's amazing to me. 44% unsheltered. Nancy was talking about those are the numbers we have a hard time getting to. That's a lot of people, though. My friend Mike Andrick has taken me on tours to see where people live. So I know that it is a lot of people, and we miss those people, unless we're doing the work you're doing. 13% physically disabled, 19% victims of domestic violence, 13% veterans, 19% employed. A very important statistic for you to remember, because one of the problems with people helping those who are homeless is the myth that homeless people don't work or lazy, which is what we call, where I'm from, bull. We actually call it a little longer word, but we'll just go with bull for now. We'll see how lively you get. So 19% of people who are homeless work. 10% are over 60, and this may be the worst stat of all. 25% to 30% of people who are in foster care when they age out are homeless after 2 years. Wow. Does everybody know that one? That's amazing to me. So about 2 months, people stay homeless on average. That includes the people who stayed homeless for a day and the people who stayed homeless for the year. And that's pretty consistent with my experience in Bangor. Would you agree, Mike? Is that pretty consistent with everybody's experience? A couple months? 3 or 4 months? Yeah, I see those months. I see those times too. Yeah, yeah. Long time to sit at the shelter if you're doing that. How boring is it to sit at the shelter? Incredibly boring. It'd be very hard not to drink or use drugs. Very hard. So, biggest causes of homelessness, lack of affordable housing. We separate out families from singles. We see that in both columns. Poverty, unemployment, substance abuse, mental illness. From what Nancy said, she gave better stats this morning, but the big picture is it's cheaper to help. 4-day longer hospital stays nationally. It's a lot of money, and the hospital is a good place to catch your death. You don't want to stay in a hospital a long time. A lot of infections run around hospitals, despite them doing everything they can. Now, when you house people, 60% savings nationally.